The second half of our panel, continuing our conversation about materials and affects, kicks off with Yoshiko Shimada. Yoshiko is a feminist artist and researcher. She received her PhD in art history from Kingston University in 2015. Her artworks explore themes of cultural memory and the role of women in the Asia-Pacific War, the Second Sino-Japanese War, and World War II. Her research interests are art and politics in post-war Japan and alternative art education in the 1960s. She's curated exhibitions such as Anti-Academy at the John Hansard Gallery in Southampton in 2013, Nakajima Yoshio Syndrome at Tsuko Baru in Tokyo in 2015, and From Nirvana to Catastrophe at Ota Fine Arts in Tokyo 2017, for which she wrote the catalogues. She assembles the archives of the seminal 1960s Japanese art critic Yoshida Yoshie and the dancer Tsuyimura Kazuko, which are now in the collections of UCLA, East Asia Library, and Keio University Art Center, respectively. She's currently organizing the Matsuzawa Yutaka archive in collaboration with the Tokyo National Institute for Cultural Properties. She lectures on Japanese art and politics of the 1960s and on art and feminisms in Japan at the University of Tokyo's College of Arts and Sciences. Welcome.
Well, thank you very much. I'd like to thank Christian for inviting me, and also Courtauld Institute. So this is the last one, so hope you bear with me. So I forgot to put the title. The title of my presentation today is A Pink Banner to Show to Nature, Matsuzawa Yutaka's Conceptualism and the Spiritual. And Matsuzawa Yutaka is a Japanese conceptual artist, and recently his work was included in a group show at the Japan Society in New York and National Museum in Singapore, and also recently there was his solo show in Los Angeles. But he's relatively unknown here, I think. So first, I'd like to do some introduction. Matsuzawa Yutaka is often referred to as one of the pioneers of Japanese conceptualism. Matsuzawa began devoting most of his practice to language-based work, following what he described as his revelation on June 1st, 1964, in which he heard a voice telling him to eradicate all objects. After 3 days of contemplation, he decided to create only works based on language. This revelation has been recounted so often that it is now accepted as the beginning of Matsuzawa's Kannen Geijutsu, that's concept art, in which he strongly advocated anti-materialism. However, Matsuzawa's work do not fit comfortably within the established framework of conceptualism as it is generally understood. First, in spite of his insistence on the eradication of objects, his work exhibits a strong materiality. Second, there is a sensual, almost erotic quality in his work that defies his idea of non-sensory art. The artist himself never clearly addressed these contradictions. In his early language-based works, Matsuzawa attempted to explain the invisible in rational and analytic terms. However, they remain in his works irrational and inexplicable subterranean elements, which I argue originate in his spirituality inherent in the environment in which he grew up. In a sense, as I will try to show, the spiritual traditions of his hometown, Suwa, contributed to this awkward coexistence of anti-materialism and materiality in Matsuzawa's work. To illustrate this relationship between materiality, sensuality, and spirituality in Matsuzawa's Kannen Geijutsu, I focus on the banner of vanishing, 1966. This 20-meter long banner of pink silk which was made for an outdoor exhibition in Sakai, Osaka, is clearly an art object on an impressive scale. Its inscription reads here, "Human beings, let's disappear. Gyate, gyate, Anti-Civilization Committee." Gyate is a Sanskrit term meaning going to the other side or reaching realization. Matsuzawa predicted that with their mistaken devotion to material objects, human beings would disappear by the year 2222. And that as the world was already full of harmful materials, we should not produce any more objects, including art objects. The artist often stated that this work was representative of his art in general. Furthermore, over the long duration of his practice, he had been consistent in his message of anti-materialism and his prediction of humans' demise. However, neither he himself nor any commentator has addressed why this message has to be conveyed on this massive scale and in color pink. Matsuzawa did try to explain the existence of invisible in rational scientific terms. In this flyer, on the meaning of psi and psi box, psi chamber, nil novi sub sole, nothing new under the sun, 1961, he lists a diverse array of fields, periods, and the locations as his sources. As the historian William Marotti notes, they range from 8th century pioneers of esoteric and tantric Buddhism and 15th century reformist theology to the mathematician and the cyberneticist Nobel winner. Matsuzawa explained that the cyborgs were manifestation of spirit, space, time, and matter, that although invisible to our senses, certainly existed. This existence of the invisible was nothing new, as it had already been investigated by the thinkers listed in the flyer. And yet, there is something beyond the rational in Matsuzawa's work. At the end of this flyer, the artist wrote, quote, "The signs employed throughout my works are at this point of two kinds: things borrowed consciously from the world of science, and things that have repeatedly manifested themselves automatically while I draw and are in effect my signatures." The signs that repeatedly appear in his early drawings were upside down omega on the lower right side, the double mounds that look like mountains or a pair of breasts. They seem to indicate Matsuzawa's strong attachment to the female body and or the natural environment. What was the origin of these signs? Based on my research at Matsuzawa's hometown, Suwa, I argue that the ancient spirituality in Suwa has significant influence on Matsuzawa and his work. The point is not that Matsuzawa's work serves as a manifestation of religious beliefs, but rather that these ideas had become part of his being and informed his artistic practice. This cultural context is essential to understanding Matsuzawa's work. So Suwa, where Matsuzawa was born, raised, and lived most of his life, is in Nagano Prefecture, in central Japan, about 200 kilometers northwest of Tokyo, and is a place with a distinct history and culture. The Suwa Shrine is officially dedicated to two gods of Shinto mythology, but its origin goes back to well before the Yamato culture's invasion and conquest from Western Japan, and the introduction of Shintoism in the 3rd century CE. Indeed, many of the ritual practices are thought to go all the way back to prehistoric Jomon period. That's 14,000 to 300 BCE. The Suwa area was thriving center of Jomon culture as the many archaeological finds around Lake Suwa test. The sites of Matsuzawa's early performances and art project were also important sacred sites of the Jomon period. For example, this 1964 independent exhibition in the wilderness, which was his first attempt to present the invisible in the form of an imaginary exhibition, took place at the Nanashima-Yashima marshland. about a 30 minutes drive from his home in Suwa. The marshland, which originated some 12,000 years ago, has been considered a sacred water source since the Jomon era. Matsuzawa also conducted the 1971 Banner of Vanishing performance at the Misayama Shrine, an important site for ritual of rebirth. And before the disappearance of humanity performance, in which he lay on the frozen surface of Lake Suwa with a sickle in his hand in 1971. When the lake is frozen and zigzag-shaped peaks of ice appear, Suwa Shrine priests divine that the Omiwatari oracle from the shape of the ice peaks to predict the year's harvest. So ancient beliefs in Suwa are said to have centered around Mishakuji, the spirit of natural force, or power of nature that presides over the cycle of life and death. This was neither a monotheism or polytheistic animism, in the sense that the folk traditions that revere the range of minor or local gods. The formless and omnipresent Mishakuji spirit could be summoned by a shaman and could come to possess a piece of land, a tall tree, a large rock, or any other natural object, including human beings. And a strange poetic passage in Matsuzawa's undated diary demonstrates how this spirituality informed the artist's thought. Quote, "There is a white kibachi tree with white paper-like flowers in the garden of my house. There is also a small portable shrine. Strangely, whenever we move the shrine, the kibachi tree seems to follow it. After we moved the shrine, the tree started to grow nearby. This thin, bone-like tree is now following me. It is on my back. It is talking to me silently, ordering me to do something. Without words, I can understand it. I was born from the tree. I have an inferiority complex from being born, not from animals or minerals, but from a plant." Matsuzawa seems to be aware of its presence, but unwilling to discuss it. Although Matsuzawa wrote copious notes and manuscripts on subjects ranging from science to esoteric Buddhism, etc., but in his archive, lots of the manuscript in his archive and his former house in Suwa, but there are very few entries that revealed his inner thought. These passages are very rare self-reflections in written form. And another example of his identification with a tree comes in the form of a language-based work, displayed as part of his solo exhibition at the Galleria Accumulatory 2 in Poznań, Poland, in 1975. Matsuzawa wrote in Catechism Art about the felling of giant trees for Bachelor Festival. Quote, "I'm sitting in side chamber and watching 9 gigantic trees cut down by me as sacrifices in deep mountain 4 leagues far from here. The gigantic trees being 4 shaku, about 120 centimeters in diameter, are now screaming as their long life being cut down after living 400 years. This solo exhibition at the Galleria Accumulatory 2 featured photographs of his history of Bachelor Festival alongside his work. The festival is held once every 7 years, and the entire community in Suwa is involved in the event. During the festival, 4 tall trees are felled on the nearby mountain, dragged to the specially prepared slope by the shrine's parishioners, and then pushed from the top of the hill, so they slide down, with some parishioners still sitting astride them. Perhaps unsurprisingly, people have sometimes killed in the descent, but this is accepted as a part of the festival. Then the pillars are put around the town, passing the road in front of Matsuzawa's house, and erected at the 4 corners of Suwa Shrine. The origin of the festival is unknown, but it certainly dates to even before the establishment of the shrine itself, more than 1,200 years ago. According to his Catechism art text for the exhibition in Potsdam, Matsuzawa feels the acute pain of the trees being cut, as if he were one with them. Yet, he is the one inflicting that pain. And even as he imagined the scene in the mountains, he is sitting in his side chamber, kilometers away. It is as if the force of nature and its mediation on Bachelor Festival either are welcome in Matsuzawa's most intimate artistic space or simply cannot be kept away. Though through this identification with the trees, Matsuzawa became a medium of the force of nature and experiences the life and death of the 400-year-old trees. The invisible Mishakuji spirit manifests itself by possessing the tree, and the tree possesses Matsuzawa. And he, in return, experiences and expresses in his work the cycle of life and death that transcends human scale. This layered text and his identification with nature shed light on the questions raised about the significance of materiality and sensuality in works such as Banner of Vanishing. So contrary to his insistence on the eradication object, this banner, as I said, is nearly 20 meters long, and despite Matsuzawa's advocacy of non-sensual art and achromatization, meaning eradication colors of the world in his pamphlet works of 1966. This banner was made of highly sensual pink silk. The color pink indicates eroticism in Japan, where mildly erotic movies are referred to as pink films. Indeed, there are surprisingly erotic or sensual elements in Matsuzawa's language-based works as well. His 1964 text-based work, Cyclops, part of which was written in a female voice. In Japanese, there's a kind of male language and female language, so this is like written in kind of female voice. It says, non-sensual painting cannot be seen or heard, but it can exist in multi-layered space. Look, it can be in your back, below your ample bosom, under your dress in the soft, subtle area, in the darkness of your stomach. The non-sensual painting will surround you, immerse you, go inside you. You cannot stand or move. You feel, oh no, I'm going to die, and taste the nirvana with your eyes closed, unquote. So this surprisingly supposedly non-sensual text is so full of sensual connotations that one might think Matsuzawa was simply making fun of the reader. But sensuality, especially concerning the procreation and reproductive organs, was a central feature of ancient spiritualism of Jomon period. Tanaka Motoi, a scholar of Jomon iconography and also of the Mishakuji spiritualism of Suwa, noted that because the Mishakuji spirit presides over life and seasonal cycle, birth to death, spring to winter, it was often worshipped in later years as a god of safe birth, pregnancy, and child rearing. And in some instances, this developed into veneration of the sexual organs themselves. Matsuzawa seems to have been interested in the form of worship. At his former house in Suwa, there are photographs of him and two other people visiting the Danseki shrine of male and female organ worship in Ueda, about 60 kilometers north of Suwa. Matsuzawa is standing in front of the phallic stone figurines donated to the shrine. Another part of the shrine has stone dishes that resemble female sexual organs. For 1969 interview in Asahi Graph magazine, a filmmaker and photographer, Kanasaka Kenji, visited Matsuzawa in his hometown. From a distance, he saw the artist on the roof of a hotel overlooking Lake Suwa, struggling to pull down the banner of vanishing, which had blown upwards and twisted in the strong wind. Kanasaka may have been present, but he was not the intended audience. The Matsuzawa was trying to show the banner to the lake. The essential, this is the part of his mail art. He printed these passages on the postcard and then sent to his friend. And it's called The Essential Painting to Show to the Lake, 1967. The message proclaims, "You are only an uninvited guest. These 9 invisible white circle essential paintings are not to be shown to human beings, but to the lake. You are only stealing a glimpse of the scene of our communication. Human beings are challenged by numerous invisible things. We must learn to see the invisible and not to see the visible." Matsuzawa's activity on the rooftop was, therefore, his way of conveying his message of disappearance to the lake. It would have been easier just to show the written message, such as this postcard, but he chose to use the 20-meter-long banner. So why the struggle? It is assumed by many that the length of 20 meters derived from Matsuzawa's obsession with the number 2. He was born on the 2nd of February, 1922, and the number 2 became a recurring element in his work, such as the year 2222, when he had predicted that humanity would disappear. But then the banner length could just as well have been 2 meters, or even 2 centimeters, if he had wanted to minimize the materiality in his work. So when I inquired about the size of the banner at the symposium in Suwa, a local resident in the audience immediately noted that it was about the same size as the length of the tallest pillar in the Bachelor Festival. As mentioned earlier, the Mishakuji spirit is often supposed to possess tall trees, and these pillars erected at 4 corners of Suwa Shrine were to bring the power of Mishakuji spirit to the area. Even if he didn't know the exact measurement of these important elements of Suwa rituals, he made his work of art on a similar scale, despite his insistence on immateriality. These parallels help to tie it to the local rituals of Suwa. With these ancient rituals in mind, it may be that the large scale of banner of vanishing indicate that it too is the seen to be, the large scale of the banner of vanishing indicates that it too is, in a sense, to be possessed by the Mishakuji spirit of natural force. We might speculate that the exhibiting banner in various locations was Matsuzawa's way of bringing the force and sharing it with the place, not only with its human population, but also with all its living and non-living things. He had performed with the banner of vanishing not only in various locations in Japan, such as Osaka, Tokyo, and Hiroshima, but also in Europe. Stockholm. This is a photo from Stockholm. He was invited to exhibition Utopian Visions in 1971. And Amsterdam, where he had a solo exhibition at and Paris, London, Venice. He was invited to Venice Biennale 1977, Berlin, and on Fulka Pass in Switzerland. And South America. He was invited twice to Sao Paulo Biennale. Although the banner's message itself is about the inevitable end of humanity, it is also a message of the recurring procreation power of nature. So the materiality in Matsuzawa's work was inevitable from the beginning. As he attempted the near impossible task of expressing the invisible and non-sensual in visual art, the contradiction was already evident. By primarily basing his work on language, he chose a channel that is often considered as only minimally material. And yet, contrary to his insistence of non-materials and non-sensual, he also created works that were large, imposing, and imbued with sensuality. I have suggested that this contradiction arose in part from his connection to the ancient spiritual practices of Suwa, which were deeply rooted in themes of eroticism, procreation, death, and rebirth. However, this spirituality is only one aspect of the multi-layered construct of Matsuzawa's work, and one must be careful not to draw the overtly simplified conclusion that his work is essentially defined by the spirituality and locality of Suwa. That would merely reinforce the chauvinistic culturalist assumption and limit any understanding of Matsuzawa's art within the contemporary discourse on the global scale. Though Matsuzawa spent most of his life in Suwa, he participated in the global exchange of ideas through a form of mail art. With the Imaginary Space Situation Research Center and Data Center of Contemporary Art, both of which are just imaginary institutions situated at Matsuzawa's house, Suwa became an important hub for ideas and information through such mail art projects as Nirvana Exhibition, 1970, and World Uprising, 1971 to 1974, in which prominent international conceptual artists such as Stanley Brown, Lawrence Wiener, Douglas Huber, and Gilbert and George, to name a few, participated. I'll show you some of the example. This was a poster of Nirvana Exhibition, in which Stanley Brown participated, and also Lawrence Wiener and Gilbert and George. Actually, Gilbert and George visited Matsuzawa twice in Suwa. So the emphasis on spirituality here is not an attempt to establish a Japanese conceptualism. The prehistoric Jomon spiritualism cannot be confined to a nationalistic framework. The Jomon scholar Tanaka has argued that the ontology of human life as a part of the eternal annular structure, the cycle of seasons, the movement of heavenly bodies, the rebirth of ancestral spirits, is a central motif in the mythological iconography of the Jomon culture, and it bears a remarkable similarity to those of Okinawa and other parts of East and Southeast Asia, and even Europe. Thus, Matsuzawa's work, though deeply rooted in Suwa, transcends this local specificity in its inextricable link to never-ending cycle of life and death. In order to do it justice, one needs to acknowledge the specific cultural context in which the artist lived and worked, the manifold cultural differences he incorporated in his practice, and his intense exchanges with other artists throughout Asia, North America, and Europe. Thank you.